So we're here at Serverless Days, AUNZ, well, online really. We wish we could be seeing you all in person, but that's not how it works at the moment. But I did manage to wrangle this dude in, my boss, the ultimate premium deluxe CEO of A Cloud Guru. I wish we could make up our own title, Sam, but anyway. And we're going to talk a little bit about serverless and where it all started and how ACG got into the serverless space and who Sam is and why Sam's here and all this stuff. So I'm going to start with, why did you choose serverless technology when you first built ACG? Why did you go down that path?
Basically, I had this idea to build an online school. But the biggest problem was how to do that when I had a whole lot of other commitments in my life, work, family. And the biggest problem I had was time. And so my brother and I had this idea to build this online learning platform, and we wanted it to be kind of next generation, really fun and engaging and a great user experience. But building that myself in my spare time was really a daunting task. And actually what happened is we had this idea, and I was really amped and really excited about it. And my wife could see that I was excited about it. And I said, yeah, it's great, but I don't have any time to build it. And she said, well, we had planned a family holiday. We were going to go away for 4 weeks as a family. It was the first family holiday we were ever going to go on with the kids. We'd been planning it for quite some time. And she said, well, take that time and go and build it, and encouraged me to do it. So we did. We actually gave up the holiday and we went and then lived with her parents for 4 weeks down in Tasmania. And I basically locked myself away in a bedroom in a little shack in Tasmania and built the first version of the school. And I got 2 days in. I tried to use some existing systems like Moodle and skin an existing learning management system, and that was insane. That was never going to work. So I got 2 days in, and I was worried that I'd kind of wasted the family holiday. This wasn't going to work. And I thought, how am I going to build this? And then I started thinking about all of these technologies I'd been experimenting with, like Auth0 for authentication as a service, Firebase as an online database. And there was this new thing that had come out called Lambda. And the term serverless didn't exist back then. This was 2015. And I realized that if my biggest problem was actually all of the time it takes to manage and set up the infrastructure to manage back-end servers. And then what if it goes down in the middle of the night while I'm asleep? We're a one-man band. How's that going to work? So ultimately I thought, hey, I could actually put the back-end logic in Lambda, and then all I have to do is write the code, and Amazon will scale it for me. And I actually don't need a whole lot of back-end logic, just a few little things. And that can kind of orchestrate between all of these cloud services. So it wasn't...
Lots and lots of Lambda.
Lots of Lambda. And it wasn't some epiphany. I'm going to build serverless. It's this grand plan. It was a constraint. It was a very tight constraint of how do I do this in 4 weeks, and then working backwards.
You're trying to find the right tool for the right job, right?
That's it. And it worked incredibly well. But and then from there, we were able to kind of help contribute to the community to build this idea of serverless architectures and what is serverless, because that term didn't exist until the end of that year. So it was really because it was fit for purpose. That's why we ended up going that way.
So we've got now almost 2 million students, or we just rounded 2 million students, depending on, I think it's it's a lot of people. Yeah. Would it have grown the same pace if it wasn't for serverless?
So would it have grown? I often get this question. Would it have grown at the same pace with kind of classic infrastructure? Well, first of all, I'd say it wouldn't exist. The company literally wouldn't exist if there wasn't serverless. There's no way I could have built it in the time that I had, and I would have given up. It would have, the way we used to build software, it would have taken a month alone just to build the authentication system, the login, the sign up, let alone anything else. I would say we would have been much slower in the first 1 to 2 years if we'd built on kind of classic infrastructure. I think.
Why is that?
Well, I think, in my experience anyway, I think the speed advantage of serverless is more pronounced early on, because we were basically building a front end wired to cloud services. So a lot of what we built were front end technologies talking directly to cloud services like Auth0 or Firebase and Stripe, all these different services. And actually there was less logic needed in the back end. And it meant being able to do that in serverless meant we didn't have to manage all of that infrastructure and think about it. So we were able to move really, really quickly with like 1 to 3 developers in the early days. And we could build things super fast because we were mostly working on front-end code. The hosting costs as well were almost zero, meaning that we could, in the early stages of the company, hire more developers and engineers, early stage employees faster. We were pretty much spending $0 on our. I think we were probably the first 6 months of the company, we existed in Amazon's free tier. Right? That didn't last, but yeah, that all scaled incredibly well. We could also sleep well at night because we weren't worried. The majority of our customers have always been in North America and Europe, and that is literally while we're asleep here in Australia. And we didn't have to worry that the thing's going to fall over. If you think about it with serverless, the only thing that I'm responsible for that could break the system is the code. And once you've deployed the code and you know it's there and it's running, most of the time that's probably going to be okay. It's more all of the infrastructure hosting and those concerns that can cause things to more randomly break, and that's Amazon or Google or Microsoft's concern.
What are some of the limitations that you came across, though? Because surely it wasn't all just, red cherries and whipped cream doing the serverless stuff.
I would say in a way because of, and I don't think it's exactly because of serverless, but because of that approach we took of being much more front-end heavy early on, it actually probably slowed us down 2 years in, because now suddenly we had so much in the front end that we needed to move back behind APIs as we wanted to scale, bring on more teams, build a mobile app. So I think some of those early architectural choices actually, they supercharged us at the start and then led us to this middle period of much slower development while we had to kind of pay off all that tech debt. I would also say for us with serverless, we started so early, and it's probably not such an issue today. There's probably echoes of it, but we started so early that there just wasn't any tooling. We had to build it all.
So how can you make the transition today? So if you want to go into serverless and say, you might have a classical infrastructure, you might be a startup, like what are the paths that you take to kind of make the most out of the whole serverless journey?
I would say if you're already a programmer, serverless is really just programming and architectural patterns. It's almost like, it's actually simpler in many ways for programmers because it's almost like just programming. You don't have to, in the past you had to be a programmer and then it's like, oh, how do I deploy and manage this thing? Whereas now you mostly focus on your code. You have to kind of understand the mechanics of how it gets deployed, but you don't have to manage that. So in a way, if you think about like when you design a program, you think more about the logical components. Like what are all the bits that talk to each other? What are the flows of data, execution flows? But then you also had to deal with, okay, well now how's it physically deployed? How do those communication processes work? It's actually kind of simpler in serverless that you can focus much more on just the logical. So I think in a way, I think a lot of people think it sounds daunting and scary, but it's actually when you get into it can be much simpler. I think some of the areas where it has been more challenging is, like I said, the maturity of some of the technologies and frameworks. When they weren't there, it was unnecessarily complicating the deployment mechanisms. But now when you have, like serverless framework is such a good system for managing that as an example. I'm a big fan of learn by doing. I think go and build something. And the good thing about serverless is you don't have to go all in. So if you've got a project at work, you've got an application, it's not like you actually have to migrate the entire application. You could carve off a piece of it to be deployed through serverless technologies in the cloud, but the rest could be sitting on EC2s or Azure VMs or even on-prem if you want to connect them together. And it's not like it's all or nothing. Hey, we run an online school, so I'd say plenty of great training out there. Lots of different sources. I'm a little biased as to where the best serverless training is, but there's a lot of great training out there. But I would encourage personally, learn by doing. Go and do something practical. Go do a practical project.
Find something you're passionate about.
Yeah, the first thing I ever built serverless was a Cloud Guru.
How do you keep on top of tech? Because I know this is one of the questions that I get a lot at talks. People go, I don't know what to learn next. How do I know if I'm learning the right things? How do I know if I'm learning all of the things like, well, we can't. Let's just make that clear. But how do you keep on top of what's new and exciting and what we could use potentially?
Yeah, and I would say there's no right answer to this. It does depend on how you learn and what you're interested in. I would say you can't know everything, so follow your heart, follow your passion. The moment I heard about Lambda, I just knew I wanted to play with it. It just to me, it was like the developer's dream, right? I can write the code and someone else can deal with everything else. I'm being a little bit facetious, but you know what I mean. And so I'd say follow your passions. I think this is a problem, and don't mean this to be a plug for what we do, but this is a problem that we hear all the time in the community and with our customers. There's so much coming out. How do I even know? And that's why we've tried to solve that problem ourselves with weekly content shows that we do, weekly news shows. What we basically found from customers is like there's like 1,000 announcements on like Microsoft's blog, Amazon's blogs, Twitter. Like, how do I even know like what's a small feature versus like what's a really important announcement? So we make these shows 5 minutes every week. They're on YouTube, they're on our site. Join Twitter, be part of the build a network, learn from others. That's what I did before we had this stuff. There's really great podcasts out there like the Cloudcast. Corey Quinn, he has a newsletter. Corey Quinn is incredibly entertaining, and so he makes it fun to want to read a newsletter every week about what's happening in cloud because he's so funny. And yeah, Twitter and the blogosphere, there's always interesting things happening there. Good companies look for people who are willing to learn rather than what technologies do they already know. We learned very early on not to try to hire people who are serverless developers because one, they didn't exist, but two, ultimately, what are you looking for? You're looking for someone who can keep up with the change and is interested in applying the latest practices and principles. So I think really demonstrating a willingness to learn is the most important thing rather than knowing any specific technology.
Thanks so much for joining me, Sam. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you. Enjoy the conference. I know it's going to be awesome.